Hello, I'm Dr. David DeRose, your host for American Indian and Alaska Native Living Radio. We've been doing something beginning in the fall of 2020 to release some of our radio interviews in video format. Today's show is no exception, as I interview Chris Sernaque. Now, if you haven't heard Chris's name, it's probably because you're not familiar with some of his podcasts. One of them is called Current Topics in Science. Chris has been doing some great work getting information out there that really challenges people in their thinking, and he did that on our episode of American Indian Living. I knew it the minute I saw my person doing post-production work on the show. They had a pencil and paper out, and what were they doing? They were taking notes, writing down the answers to a self-testing quiz that Chris was administering during the show. Now, that quiz you'll find in its entirety in our full show. But in this brief video feature, we'll talk about the background of Chris Sernaque. We'll talk about some exciting information that can help you or those you love if you're ever dealing with some serious issues, contemplating suicide, maybe thinking about hurting yourself, maybe just discouraged, maybe feeling bullied. He'll talk about the crisis text line that he's involved with. And also, you'll get a feel for why understanding our personalities is so important. In fact, that was the topic of the quiz. If you want to listen to the whole interview, you'll find it at aianl.org. That stands for American Indian Alaska Native Living.org. Of course, the radio show is called American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Also, look for this entire interview to come out on Current Topics in Science, the podcast hosted by Chris Sernaque. With that background, I want to jump into a portion of that video, a portion of the dialogue that I had with Chris. I think you'll enjoy it as we set up this exciting show and give you some practical information, whether it's about crisis helpline or whether it's about the importance of personality. I'm Dr. DeRose. Welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Dr. David DeRose. We've got a great show lined up for you today with a fascinating guest. He's a psychotherapist and a popular podcaster, at least in some circles. Christopher Sernaque is with us. Chris, it's great to have you with us on the show today.
It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here, Dr. DeRose.
Now, Chris, I know people in some of the circles that I deal with, you're a household name. You've been doing a couple of popular podcasts for some time. Tell us about the two podcasts that you host.
I host two podcasts. One is called Current Topics in Science, and the other is called Pilot's Interview.
Now, you've got a very fascinating background, Chris. My listeners who know of you, who've watched your stuff, that's not news to them. But for a lot of the folks who are joining us in the dialogue today, Christopher Sernaque may be a name they haven't heard before. Tell us a little bit about your training and some of the work that you do.
Sure. I went to Ashworth College. I studied psychology, and after that I went to Texas State University and studied integrative mental health. I wanted to immediately begin to apply my training, and so I volunteered at an organization called Crisis Text Line. I received over 30 hours of training, and I work with people for about maybe 2 to 4 hours, at least 5 days a week, as they text in with their various mental health problems.
Now, that is quite a responsible job. I mean, these are people, some of them I'm assuming maybe contemplating suicide or having really serious mental health struggles. So you're working with a team of people that gives kind of on-the-spot support to people who are struggling. Do I understand it correctly?
Absolutely. Crisis Text Line is a worldwide organization. Anyone with either a cell phone or internet access can reach Crisis Text Line. You have to just text 741-741, and you'll be able to reach out, and a crisis counselor will immediately be linked to you, or you might have to wait a few moments depending on your connection, or you can go to the Facebook account and write in, and People at Crisis Text Line will work with you if you're being bullied, if you're contemplating ending your life, if you're having trouble at home, if you're having trouble at school, or if you simply would like to open up about your inner emotional state and learn how to move forward in a progressive and a positive way.
So did I catch it? It's simply 741-741. That's all I need to remember?
Absolutely. It's 741-741, and you can text in 24/7. There are people who are even working at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you'll find people working at 11 p.m. at night, and so you can reach out at any time from any place in the world.
So this is exciting. So first message for today, if you take nothing else away from today's show, and we've got a lot of great stuff coming up, but if you know of someone who's challenged, or just for yourself, I mean, you may be doing great today, but make a note of that, put it on your refrigerator, 741-741, the crisis text line. And Chris, do we have any idea of how many people actually work with this project?
The number of people that text in is in the millions.
Wow.
If you go to the Crisis Text Line website, you can actually see some of the analytics of the number of people that are texting in, and you can see the various demographics of the different people that are texting in with either a problem that's related to a mental health issue or some kind of circumstantial issue. And just for the listeners to know, there's nothing too extreme to mention to a crisis counselor. I've spoken to many individuals who are either contemplating ending their life or are currently engaged in an act of self-harming. And so these issues we've already been trained to deal with and speak with. That way no listener has to feel as though they can't open up about what's really going on inside their heart. Anyone is free to mention whatever they have or whatever they'd like to speak about.
This is just powerful, Chris. Thanks for sharing that very important message. We've got a lot of other important things that I believe can make a big difference for our listeners today. One of them has to do with a subject that I know is very close to your heart, and it has to do with understanding your personality type. Why has this emerged as such a big issue for you in the kind of work that you do, as well as in the communication that you do on your podcast?
Well, I would venture to wager that knowing your personality type is one of the most important things for every individual on the face of this earth, and every individual listening to find out. Now, I know that sounds like a strong statement, but I have good reason to believe that it is vital for each of us to understand our own nature, because the very fabric of civilization is held together by a stable collective of fortified individuals. And in more practical terms, our day-to-day lives are going to have greater clarity to them.
Now, when you mentioned 4 to 5, these are individual character types or personality types, or are these specific individuals that we're interacting with when you mention that figure?
When I mention fortified individuals, what I mean to say is that as an individual that is unfamiliar with your personality type, there is a certain element of mystery to you, and you might be uncertain about your identity, and people who are uncertain about their identity often feel stressed because they feel aimless. There's a popular author who said that an aimless life is a living death. And so for someone who has this aimlessness or this uncertainty about their life, understanding their personality can help provide them a certain framework or groundwork in order to be more level-headed and have a bit more of an objective view of themselves.
So I like the concept, and I know my listeners, as they're tuning in, I mean, some people say, well, maybe this would be helpful for me, maybe it would give me more direction, maybe it would help in my relationships. But a lot of times when we speak about personality types, I mean, at least historically, I've thought of that, well, as kind of the realm of the psychologists, the people, administering psychometric tests. Someone's got to, first of all, connect with someone, maybe go through an expensive and long testing process, maybe even several hours or more. Is there any way people can get a simple idea of some practical things that we could communicate on this show, for example, Chris?
Sure, and actually, before we get into practical ways of understanding your personality, I'd actually like to share with you and with your audience a quote from one of the most respected psychologists of the 20th century, and his name is Dr. Viktor E. Frankl.
Even I know Viktor Frankl's name, and I'm not a psychologist. So give us that quote.
You see, what makes Dr. Frankl so interesting is that he survived the Holocaust. And that's one of the most tragic and heartbreaking events of the 20th century. He published a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in the final paragraph, right before the postscript, he wrote a really interesting statement concerning the very nature of mankind. Then I'd like to share this with your audience because it's so significant in helping us understand our personality.
Please do that. You've got us engaged, definitely.
Well, Dr. DeRose, I tell you, I've never seen human nature contrasted better than in this chilling paragraph from Dr. Frankl. So just listen to how masterfully he breaks down human nature. Dr. Frankl writes, "Our generation is realistic, for we have come to know man as he really is. After all, man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he is also the being who entered those gas chambers upright with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips." Now, those are some startling words from Dr. Frankl, but in these words, he captured just why it's essential that all of us understand our personalities. For all of us have strengths that we need to maximize and weaknesses, vices, areas of our character that we need to improve and rectify. So think of it like this. A man, he might not ever see that he has a blotch on his face. He may have been working in the shop, and so he was so caught up in what he was doing, he couldn't tell what happened to him. But when he looks in the mirror, he can see that he needs to be washed. And that's what personality tests are, Dr. DeRose. They're the mirror that each of us should look into.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed that interview with Chris Sernaque, at least that portion of the interview that we featured on this special video release. But if you want to hear the whole video, if you want to take the quiz to determine your personality type, at least to give you an idea of that, that's available on the full-length show. You can find that on our website, American Indian and Alaska Native Living. It's simply abbreviated AIANL.org. If you go there, you'll find all our archive shows. This show should be up there on or about October 5th of 2020 when it will be released to the stations airing our program. If you're a follower of Chris Sernaque, or if you just want to get better acquainted with him, this entire video interview is going to be released on his podcast site, Current Topics in Science. I invite you to go to either one of those platforms, either one of those programs, and enjoy the entire interview. Well, for now, I'm Dr. David DeRose, as always, wishing you the very best of health.